name's Lindsay Elizabeth and I'm an indie author. I made a video a while ago about how to find beta readers or where to find beta readers, and I said that I would make a video about questions you could ask beta readers, and then I never did. So now I am. Now's the video. I think we can pretty much just jump right into these. I do have kind of a few categories I'll go through. So the first one would be about the story, or more specifically, story structure and flow. So these are just some kind of initial questions you can ask pretty much anybody who's going to be beta reading for you. I do want to make a point that you don't have to ask all of these questions, and you can ask more specific questions if there are certain parts of your story that you think need more work or aren't sure how to flesh out. But these are just some basic ones, and I'll leave them all in the description box below so you can just take them and do with them what you will. So, story structure and flow. First question, did the story hold your interest from the beginning? If not, why? You want to make sure that your story has a really strong beginning, because if somebody doesn't like the beginning, they probably don't want to keep reading. Was there a point at which you felt the story lagged, or you were really trying to push getting through it in order to keep reading? You definitely don't want to lose reader interest at any point, but you also want to make sure that if something felt really slow, you can go back and correct that, maybe add more detail or more action or something like that, whatever you think the story needs. And remember that when beta readers give you feedback, you don't need to incorporate all of it or even any of it, but it is a good idea of what your potential readers might think of the story. Were there any parts of the story that confused you? This is really important because as authors, we have all of this information in our heads, and sometimes it just doesn't come across on the page the way that we planned it to. So if something was confusing, you need to know, because people hate being confused when they read. Some people like a good thinker or like a riddle or something where you're kind of figuring out a plan, but downright confusing is a really good way to lose interest. Did you feel that there was enough description or exposition or not enough? Basically, you just want to make sure that things are being described, and if you have a really fast-paced novel, sometimes you skimp on descriptions, but sometimes those little details can really make a world feel real to readers. Was there enough conflict, interest, motivation? Like, basically, did you want to keep reading? However you want to ask that. I mean, we've kind of gone over a couple of questions like that, but did it hold your interest? Was there enough conflict? Or was the story kind of boring, you know? We don't want our stories to be boring. We want to be engaging to those readers. So, a good question to ask. A little side note, the way that I set up my beta reading documents, I have all of these questions pretty much listed out in the beginning of here's some things to keep in mind, but I'm not going to ask you all of these questions. You don't have to fill this out like a survey, but these are the questions to keep in mind. And then after key chapters, like chapter 1, 15, and the end of the book, because those are really pivotal moments for me in my story in Kingdom of Ice and Nightmares. After those chapters, I actually have little Google surveys, and I just linked the survey and said, like, here's chapter 1 survey, here's chapter 15 survey, here's the final survey. And I asked more specific questions, but at the end of the story, in the final survey, I asked these two questions. Did the story feel complete to you? And was the ending satisfying? Because you never want your readers to walk away like mad that you finished a story that way or that certain questions weren't answered. Even if you're leaving it on a cliffhanger, you really need to make sure that there are key things answered so that they don't just feel like they wasted their time reading your entire book. And also, if you leave it on a cliffhanger and it takes you a little while to get the next book out, kind of like Ice and Nightmares will be before the 4th book, you want to make sure that it's satisfying enough that they're going to want to think about it and they're going to want to pick up the next book when that does come out. Next, we can go over some sort of character relatability questions because we want our characters to feel real to the reader. First one is, could you relate to the main character? Usually people want to relate in some way or another to the main character, whether it's because of the struggle they're going through or what they're motivated to get out of the story. Who was your favorite character and why? I love asking just these really simple open-ended questions like that, because sometimes people's favorite character is not your favorite character, and you might have just done them a justice you didn't realize. For instance, in Kingdom of Ash and Shadow, I have this side character, and he's kind of like the comedic relief side character, but he's also like I love a good fleshed out side character, so I think all of my side characters have pretty good backstories, personalities, they're all very different from each other. But a crowd favorite has been Alistair from Kingdom of Ash and Shadow, so that's super fun to see, and I'm glad that people are connecting with him. But asking who your favorite character is and why just gives you a little more insight into how you're building these characters and what you did a really good job of. And you can also use it for marketing later. were these characters believable? Are there characters that you think could be more interesting or fleshed out, or you just didn't care about them? Sometimes it's hard with side characters or characters that aren't on the page that much to make sure that they're a fleshed out whole character with their own story going on, because we see them in the lens of how do they work the story for the main character, but they also have their own story going on. So you can't just pick up a side character and plop them in when it fits, or at least not exactly the way they were the last time you saw them. So making sure that characters are believable, that you kind of have an idea of what's going on off page while they're not there, those types of things are really important to think about. And if a reader notices that a character is really cardboard cutout, very stale, doesn't have much of a personality, that doesn't make the reading experience quite as fun. Were there too many characters to keep track of? Another kind of question like this is, were any of the character names really similar? Sometimes as you're writing and coming up with character names, you don't realize that certain characters have very similar names until maybe they're next to each other. For instance, in Kingdom of Ice and Nightmares, I have Genesis, who is our main character. Sometimes she goes by Jen. She goes on this quest with a man named Gawain. So we have Jen and Gawain, and Jen ends up going to Ale, which is from both books. But Kingdom of Ash and Shadow introduced this servant or attendant. Her name is Gwen. So when Jen and Gwen meet, Jen is drunk and she thinks it's super funny that they have similar names. And then she goes, wait, your name is Gwen, my name is Jen, and I know somebody named Gwen. This is weird. So I called it out because I realized very late in the writing process, and I didn't want to change their names, but they're not really all together on page all that much. So you kind of just have to be aware of where people are, how their names sound. Does it get confusing? Is it weird? Do the characters notice? I also have an indie author mutual on TikTok where she realized that all of her characters in a book, their names ended in an sound. So just kind of keeping track of that stuff could be really helpful. But going back to, were there too many characters to keep track of, you want to make sure that the cast is small enough that people can get to know everybody, but big enough that you're not just having a ton of internal exposition. Our next category is about setting and world building, which I know some people struggle with. Just asking kind of one of those simple open-ended questions like, did the setting feel real to you? Were the descriptions vivid enough? Something along those lines to make sure that the world felt real and your reader got a little bit immersed into this world. Also asking if they got orientated pretty quickly with the world. Did they figure out where the setting was? Did they figure out that it was in a city, or was it rural, or is it a fantasy world? Did they realize that it was on Earth, or is it its own world? Things like that. Just making sure that your settings and your descriptions are vivid enough and real enough that right away the reader knows roughly where this story takes place is very helpful. Next category is dialogue or speaking, writing style. Basically, similar question as the last one. Did the dialogue keep your interest? Did it sound real? Yeah. Also asking whose dialogue, if somebody's felt clunky, like get a little bit specific on who it was, because maybe that's important to their character that they speak that way, but it didn't come across as well. So you just have to keep an eye on that. Did it come across the way it was meant to, or did it come across clunky and robotic? Kind of with the writing style, just asking if they noticed any discrepancies. If there was a door closed in one scene and then like a minute later a character walked through it and it was open. Those are just things that kind of pull readers out of stories, and you just want to make sure all those little details are buttoned up. Last couple questions are just kind of your reader's take on the story. I would ask them, are there any moments you wished lasted longer? Kind of going way back to one of those beginning questions about were there any moments that you were really pushing through? But asking if there were moments they wished lasted longer gives you an idea of what they found to be really important, or maybe where your writing really shines. And then asking them to highlight like favorite quotes and stuff is always so fun because you can use that in marketing later too. And the last one you can use in marketing as well, but asking what were your favorite tropes, because sometimes as authors we think we know the tropes that are in our book, and somebody might say, oh, I really loved the found family, and I was like not thinking about found family at all, but it totally relates to the story. So just getting an idea of what people really enjoyed gives you a better idea of how you can market your book later to find the readers that enjoy those types of things. Those are all the questions that I had. Again, I had some specific ones in my forms. If you want to hear more about the beta reader like sending process, let me know. You can check out that video on where to find beta readers. I did find a couple of beta readers just through my social media network, and I am so grateful that they wanted to beta read for me. They said both of them really enjoyed the first 2 books, so I hope this 3rd book really lives up to the storyline for them. If you have any questions that you like to ask your beta readers, drop them in the comments. Maybe we can make some kind of a master list document. I think that would be really fun. But other than that, I'll see you in the next video. Bye!